You will engage not only members of the National Assembly and other statutory bodies like INEC, civil society groups, but Nigerians are interested in the way and manner we do our activities here. Nigerians definitely have interest in the constitutional review that the National Assembly will back upon. There are several issues that Nigerians feel very strongly about. The Constitutional Review Committee is supposed to be a platform where such issues could be brought and where those who are interested should ensure that they make every possible effort, including presentations, for their views to be considered. We as a National Assembly, particularly the Senate, we want to have a very stable country. We want to have a country that gives every citizen the opportunity to actualize his or her dream. We want to have a security that is enhanced and an economy that works for everyone. Stability of the polity is important. We have to have a country before we run for elections or indeed undertake any activity.
Joining us to discuss the plan by the Senate to review the Constitution, we have with us here Associate Professor, Department of Political Science, University of Lagos, David Awurawo. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay. First of all, how did that plan of the Senate come across to you?
Well, the details are not clear. And so it is difficult for one to really give a firm assessment. The extent to which they hope to go in consultation before they start the review is also not very clear. And so it makes it difficult for one to be able to speak in definitive terms regarding what the Senate or what the National Assembly is trying to do. But there is some understanding, some consensus across the country that there is the need for the review of the Constitution. The modalities, the approach, and the extent is what is not so clear. But there is some understanding, some consensus that there should be some review of the Constitution. In fact, people have even raised fundamental issues regarding the fact that the document we are using today as the Constitution it did not emanate from the people.
Are you hopeful that this one will go far, given that we've had attempts over the years since the First Republic began?
Well, since the National Assembly is the one, coming up with the idea, maybe. But if history is anything to go by, we have had so many attempts like this, which came to naught. At least the most recent since this Fourth Republic is the 2014, conference, and then, of course, the one of 2005. Nothing has come out of both. So if I have to look at history, one is almost tempted to conclude that it will just be one exercise in futility. Right. But since it's coming from the National Assembly and they are the ones empowered to, make laws, maybe.
Okay. Let's also bring in Professor Akin Oyebode, who is a professor of international law and jurisprudence. He joins us from a location in Lagos. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us this morning. First of all, are you hopeful that this plan by the Senate to review the Constitution is going to go through this time?
Well, I'm not too excited by the efforts of the National Assembly. Like my colleague just said, it will end up an exercise in futility. We have put the cart before the horse. It is not for the National Assembly to give Nigeria a constitution. It is the constitution that will give birth to the National Assembly. The job of the National Assembly is to make workaday laws for the peace, order, and good government of Nigeria. So It is the Constituent Assembly that will deliberate and fashion out a fundamental law for Nigeria. So quite sincerely, I think we got it wrong. I remember many years ago, I was on Sunrise with the leader of the APGA, and he said that the car has been panel beaten so many times that it's now battered. So what we need, he said, was a brand new car. So if we agreed that the military decree that is masquerading as a constitution is worse than useless, then of course we have to go about replacing it with the basic law of Nigeria. I think we got it wrong again.
And now, if we could step back a bit, is the fact that what questions do, well, some call it Decree 24 of 1999, fail to answer for us as a nation? What questions are we looking forward to this constitution answering for us as Nigeria?
Well, we have to elaborate a true federalism. In other words, the constituent units that comprise Nigeria must be given the leeway and freedom to enact laws in respect of their affairs. We need devolution of powers. We have to decentralize. We have to reconfigure the federal setup that we are operating. A situation where the federal level has 62 items under its dominance, and you have a concurrent list of a few items and then a residual list. We have to rethink and refashion the constitutional arrangement so that we have what we call a true federalism. Registration of births and deaths should not be the business of Abuja. We should not be running to Abuja for every little thing. You remember what the previous Deputy Speaker in Senate, he said we are operating a feeding bottle federalism, that every month the constituent units have to run to Abuja to replenish their feeding bottle. Now that is a joke. We either have a federal setup or we don't. What we've been operating under the military constitution is a quasi-federal arrangement so that the constituent units don't have the freedom, they don't have the capacity, they don't have the power to legislate on matters that affect their constituents, that's the population. So that's why I thought it's good to discuss the necessity for a rethinking of our constitution. But having said that, it is not the National Assembly that should give us a new constitution.
Okay.
We, the people, or our representatives, formed into a constituent assembly, should discuss the modalities of living together. So that is the approach of those who are knowledgeable in these matters. It should not be a situation where the blind is leading the rest of us. We are getting about it wrongly.
Right.
We have examples of different federal governments to look at: the United States, Germany, Mexico, India, Australia, so many federations. So if you want to run a federal setup, then you must go about it well, okay? So that you don't end up with a caricature of a federal setup.
Professor, we have had this, we have tried, we have made these attempts, you know, one or two times before, and you are saying now that the approach that the Senate is going about it isn't, you know, exciting for you. But we have made attempts before. What was it that we didn't get right that ought to be corrected now so that this exercise can be meaningful?
Well, to reiterate, I said we need a constituent assembly. Constitution making is a matter for a constituent assembly, however comprised, either by election or by nomination. A small group of people to look at how we've gotten on with ourselves and fashion out a blueprint for cohabitation. I remember the late Bola Ige, God bless him, wherever he is, said there are only two questions that the Constituent Assembly should pose. One, do we want to live together? And two, how? Once we sorted that out, then we put the recommendations before a national referendum. And if 51% of the population agree on the modalities for cohabitation, then we have a new constitution which is not only valid, but is also legitimate. What we've been having, I'm talking of Decree 24 of 1979, is an illegitimate instrument. You remember the Patriots said one of the tragic flaws of that arrangement was that it told a lie against itself. Where did we people gather to discuss and agree to live together? We never had that. It was a product of a military diktat. What you had was the Abdul Salam Constitution. I believe 25 Nigerians were constituted to draft the 1999 Constitution, the Abdul Salam Constitution. I think Nigerians now have the right to enact to themselves the fundamental law that will regulate how they are going to live together. I mean, the infelicities of that constitution are well known. We will be wasting time recounting how unworkable a quasi-federal setup is for a country that has over 400 ethnic groups. And that's why we've been in the jam that we find ourselves. So I think we have to get it right, finally, by setting up a Constituent Assembly that will produce a draft constitution which will be voted on by the generality of Nigerians. That's how to get about it. Okay. In America, they had a Constituent Assembly, you know, the Congress of Philadelphia. And later it crystallized into the United States Constitution in 1787. So you must learn from the experience of others. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. How has it been done elsewhere? And then there's nothing wrong in copying good examples. In fact, Thomas Bohe once said that the customs house is yet to be built that could prevent the export of good examples. So I would suggest to countrymen, Nigerians, that we have to do it well and right in order not, again, another 5 years down the line, we start discussing the necessity to amend the Constitution. The Constitution we have now has gone through a number of amendments. It's so laughable when people talk of the Constitution as amended. The American Constitution has gone through over 26 amendments, but you never heard them say the Constitution of the US as amended. So there will be an amending formula in the Constitution which could be revisited if and when necessary. But to give the impression that the Constitution is just another law which can be amended at will, I think it's making us a laughing stock before the rest of the world.
Professor David Awurawo is of the Department of History and Strategic Studies, UNILAG in Akoka. You've heard Professor Yebode, and his opinion is that the National Assembly doesn't necessarily have to be the one to take the lead. It should be the Constituent Assembly to be constituted. How do you react to that?
Ideally, that's how it should be. Except that, you know, over many years, we have, you know, tried to create a different path. What we are talking about now should have taken place in 1998, when, the Fourth Republic was about to emerge, there ought to have been a Constituent Assembly that would have produced a constitution that Nigerians would have agreed to. If that had taken place at that time, all of the issues we have now, all of the problems, the challenges, and the criticism, especially revolving around the fact that Nigerians were not only just a handful of people that the military brought together, produced in the 1999 Constitution. And so we cannot really say we the people, produced that Constitution. So ideally, that is, how it ought to be. So it's a question of, do we want to dismantle the House and rebuild, which is the ideal thing, or do we want to patch what we have? Actually, what the National Assembly is trying to do is an attempt to patch what we have.
Which one would you prefer?
Well, I would prefer a total dismantling, actually, because if we patch, we'll likely patch again. But if we, dismantle and then rebuild properly, we have a solid foundation.
Are you saying,
then the tendency to patch, will be less moving forward.
Are you saying that the 4 alterations or amendments of the 1999 Constitution were the patching?
Yes, the product of patching, because it was discovered that there were needs for certain issues to be looked at in different ways. In actuality, no society is static. Life ought to be dynamic. Societies are dynamic. And so, in many constitutions, there's no problem with that. Every country does that. When the need is identified and it is reckoned that the constitution will need to be adjusted to attend to that need, that takes place. But the problem with the 1999 Constitution is that it is fundamentally flawed because it's not a product that emanated from the people. That is a fundamental issue.
So, at the danger of sounding like a broken record, people will say the 2014 National Conference. How about we start from there? So, I'd like to put this to you. The National Conference, was that an attempt, perhaps, to build something new?
Yes, it was. It was. I would even want to go back to 2005.
All right.
Because if you look at what happened in 2005 and what took place in 2014, there are similarities. And if you pick the report of 2005 and pick that of 2014, it's almost the same. Except that in 2014, the report is more elaborate. There was more consensus, more elaborate and all. But the two documents are basically the same. But the question that will be asked is, was that a Constituent Assembly that was, that had the objective of producing a new constitution for Nigeria? Many will say no. So that is where I would agree with Professor Yubode that a Constituent Assembly will need to be, established to, produce a proper constitution for Nigeria. But the attempts of 2005 and 2014 cannot be regarded as a waste. What if we decide, if a Constituent Assembly were to be, established today to produce a new constitution, what they will come up with will be very, very close to what is contained in the report of 2005 and 2014. Nigerians remain the same. The ideas remain the same. The issues on which they build consensus, remain the same. So it will likely be something very close to the aggregation of what is contained in those two reports. But you see, there is some idea about psychology, a psychological satisfaction that, we produced this constitution. We had a Constituent Assembly that produced this constitution. It emanated from us. And so we are saying, we the people have produced this constitution. So that will give us that satisfaction that we now have a constitution that we can call our own,
right,
that would address our needs.
So you probably agree with those who think that we should go back to the 2014-2005 report and use that as perhaps major ingredient in this major process that the Ninth Assembly is going through.
Exactly. If you look at very, very similar. In 2014, the issues that were contentious were the same issues that were contentious in 2005. Resource control. I mean, how much resources would states? It was continued in 2005. It was the same major issue that was continued in 2014. So the issues are basically the same. And if you look at how much powers would the states have and all that, the issues remain basically the same. But of course, like I said before, we need to have a solid foundation. A constitution that actually emanates from us. And when one, looks back, one is amazed that in the early 21st century, we're talking about Nigeria having a constitution that does not emanate from Nigerians. When as far back as 1950, when the colonial government was, in charge was administering Nigeria, consultations were held from village level, regional level, provincial level before a national conference was held in Ibadan early in 1950. If the British government, the colonial government, found it necessary for Nigerians to be a part of a constitution that will be used to, govern their affairs as early as 1950, and in 2020, we are talking about Nigeria having a constitution that does not emanate from the people. It is a tragedy.
But what would, let me take this to Professor Oyebode. What are the things that you would say, Professor, that have hindered us from taking on the gauntlet to produce a brand new constitution, altogether? If you would, there is this information out there about the 4 alterations that we have had to the 1999 constitution as over the years. There was an amendment in 2010, July 2010, amendment in November 2010, the second one. The third alteration happened March 2011, and the fourth one happened July 2017. Yet, you think, sir, that these alterations are not answering the desires of Nigerians. So, why are we holding back from taking up the gauntlet to, as you proposed in 2018, discard the 1999 Constitution and come up with a new one?
Well, as you know, I was a member of the Constituent Assembly, what you call the Confab, in 2014. And it was a galaxy of Nigerian stars. I remember wondering aloud if we can ever have such an assemblage of distinguished Nigerians, generals, professors, administrators, all manner of people that were assembled in Abuja for about 3 or 4 months, discussing on a daily basis what to lay the foundations for the new Nigeria. And we ended up with a draft constitution. All that Nigeria needed to have done was to set up a blue ribbon panel to put a tooth comb through the draft and come up with a feasible constitution from that draft that was hammered out at that conference. But I understand President Buhari said he would not have anything to do with the efforts of the distinguished members of the confab. They came out with more than 600 recommendations. It was a very intensive engagement. I am lucky and privileged to have been part of that exercise. And you needed to be at the confab to grasp the depth of the intellect exhibited at that conference. But as I said, in Nigeria, we always try to reinvent the wheel. And we just hope and pray that we will get it right, so that our grandchildren will not laugh at us. So those who are in the Congress of Philadelphia, will in their graves be happy that they produce an enduring document for the United States of America. That every 2 or 3 years, we want to tinker with what we have. It shows that what we think we have is not the right thing. And if we want the real McCoy, I've told you how it's done or how it has been done in other places. Nigeria is far too advanced as a country in terms of the intellect, in terms of the exposure, in terms of the experience and the wherewithal to create a fundamental law for Nigeria. You have numerous qualified Nigerians who can help out. But what the Senate is doing, I think, is self-serving and self-seeking and self-opinionated. That is why one is not enthused by their efforts.
If we could just take a look at it, over time, Nigerians have talked about issues and areas which they would like to see changes. So let's just run you through some of those areas, possible constitutional review areas. You see one that sticks out is the federal structure, and that involves power and resource control, just to show you some of that. And then you see the other one, economy, which is a big deal. It involves revenue allocation formula. And another area is security, which is a big deal. Issues of state police, structure of the armed forces. And you look at governance also, the area of the status of local governments, creation of state and local councils, as well as the judiciary, which is also another major talking point. Supreme Court jurisdiction. What cases should the Supreme Court, hear? Should it be just, usual cases, family issues or issues between the federal government, the state government, and states also. And another one, which is electoral law, is also something that people talk about. So let's take it back to Professor Oyebode and ask, which of these stick out for you? If you would say this should be priority for this committee as we have it right now, which of the following, which I listed earlier, should be priority perhaps for them?
Well, in my view, all the items you listed are critical, but you want me to create some arrangement based on priorities. It's difficult for one to say, but one could surmise that true federalism should be on the front burner. If we really recognize that the constituent units of the Nigerian Federation deserve to order their lives the way they want, then of course we have to restructure, what you call restructuring. People don't like that word, but it's a very important word because we either restructure or we die. So I think we have to restructure Nigeria, give each component part of Nigeria a sense of belonging. Don't make people feel alienated or marginalized or excluded from the running of this country. So we have to decentralize. We have to devolve powers. We have to reconfigure, as I said, reconstitute and restructure Nigeria as we know it. And that goes, for instance, to dismantling the quasi-federal setup. You don't have a federation of such complexity working under a centralized police. It's ridiculous. Like my friend Onai Komi mentioned, the United States, which we borrowed federal setup from, is very decentralized. My university in America had its own police. So what's the big deal about having state police? In fact, there's nothing wrong in each state having its own constitution. Loose federal setup so that the constituent units form the basis of our living together. It's not that you need passports or you need visas to move from state to state, but you must devolve powers to the component units of the Nigerian Federation so that the people are carried along in governance. Now, the question of taxation, the question of disbursement of national resources, those are details that can be arranged from time to time. A situation where, as I said previously, the states of the federal setup go every month cap in hand to Abuja to get their sustenance is unholy, is unwholesome, and should be discarded forthwith. Let the states be masters of their own terrain and whatever they produce, and then let them pay some tax to the federal government for running joint services. We still will have a national currency. There should be a national army. Foreign relations should be national. Stuff like that. But a situation where the governors are governors only in name. They don't have controlling powers over their commissioners of police. As I said, it's most unworthy. It's unthinkable. You call them chief security officers of their states, but they have no command powers over the contingents of police located within their area. So we have to rethink all these things. Things that make the system unworkable should be jettisoned. And in order to create a new Nigeria where the constituent units have some form of power over making laws for the peace, order, and good governance of their people. Now, a situation again, as I said, where you have to run to Abuja for every little thing is most unwholesome. We have to decentralize, make sure that we are a real federation. What people talk about a true federation, not a quasi-federation. You know, federalism and militarism, they are odd bedfellows. The soldiers don't want federalism.
Professor, let me ask this question. You mentioned something earlier about the need to restructure the federal system that we operate. What exactly do you mean there? Because I remember that in the 2014 conference that you referenced earlier, there was some suggestion. What exactly are you looking for us to adjust? And would you still be proposing the same thing should there be need?
I'm sorry, my earpiece is not helping, but I presume you want me to elaborate on restructuring.
No.
We have,
sorry, you said the other time that we needed to rework, to revisit the federal structure that we operate. But I also remember that in 2014, the Constitution Review Committee that you sat on, that you were part of, made a proposition about the presidential system of government that we were operating, that we operate, that you were proposing some kind of adjustment to the presidential system to make it homemade. What exactly do you mean by that? And would you be proposing the same thing? Should there be the need?
Now, if I remember rightly, the Constituent Assembly or the CONFAB suggested rotation between North and South. And then also within the states, the governors should be rotated among the senatorial districts. That is just a semblance of restructuring. Restructuring involves reconstituting, the federal setup by shaving the hair of the federal government. Let the constituent units have more powers of governance. I mentioned 62 items on the exclusive list. Now that is excessive. We have to cut back on what we have thrown on the shoulders of the federal government. Let the states be in charge of most of those things, and then we leave the federal government to handle common services, issuing of currency, foreign service, defense, and such. Other things should be local. All politics, after all, like Chief O'Neill used to say, is local. So if you want Nigerians to be involved and to feel proud of themselves as Nigerians, let them bring governance close to them, instead of the distant government in Abuja that is very costly to access. If you want to go to Abuja now, you'll be thinking of the airfare, you'll be thinking of hotel cost, you'll be thinking of then what of security if you are going to drive. In fact, you need to be overly bold to jump into your car and be driving to Abuja. People will wonder if you are normal. So what I'm saying is bring government closer to the people in the constituent units. Empower the constituent units to make laws for the peace, order, and good governance of these constituent units. So it's something that it's not just amendment, what the Senate has been talking about. Amendment, like my colleague there said, he said patching. I call it panel beating. When the car is over panel beating, you better get a new one. That's what we are talking about. We don't want another set of amendments. Before you know it, you are far removed from the fundamental or basic law of your country. So I think the efforts of the Senate are somewhat misdirected. I think they should have just passed a law for the setting up of a constituent assembly, either election or whatever, and then you leave the constituent assembly to elaborate, to fashion out the blueprint for a new Nigeria. And that will be subject to a referendum. And if 50 plus 1% of the electorate vote in favor of such a blueprint, then voila, you got a new constitution fashioned by Nigerians, catering to the needs and interests of the overwhelming majority of Nigerians. It's that simple. It's not complicated, but people lack the political will to do the needful.
If that were to be the route which we'll take, and I'd like to bring this to Lagos, Lagos studio rather, if that were to be the route we'll take, saying, you know what, let's stop patching, as you've said, and panel beating, as Professor Oyebode has said, whose responsibility is it to start that conversation? Now, we'll get to the committee and the deliverables, but if we were to go the other route, whose responsibility will that be?
It will be that of the government. The last two we had, 2005, 2014, it was the executive. Now it's the legislature that is trying to, start something. So, like Professor said, they could pass a law, for the Constituent Assembly to, be set up to produce a new constitution for the country. But like I said before, if you lay hold on the report in 2005 National Political Reform Conference, and that was 2014, they are very, very similar. The contents, the issues, what was agreed upon, issues on which they build consensus, very, very similar. So if you ask me really, the best way would have been to just bring out that 2014, the report of the 2014, National Conference, right, the CONFAB, and, put in place modalities for the implementation of the contents of that report. The true federal structure we are talking about, all the issues that concern us, all the issues we continue to talk about, in fact, there are things we are doing now out of the current constitution. For instance, the issue of power rotating between North and South, that is not a constitutional, it's not in the constitution. It is contained in the 2014 report. So there are even things we are doing that the constitution does not provide for, that we know is right, but we are doing it outside the constitution.
Do you see the Senate going this route?
I do not. I do not. Everybody wants to, grandstand. Everybody wants to say, oh, it was my time that this was done. So they are trying to start afresh, reinvent the way, to use Professor Oyebade's this thing, where we already have a document that speaks to virtually every issue that we are trying to,
But why do you think they wouldn't want to go through?
Well, for several reasons. One, because the previous government did that, and for some reason, some in this government don't want to identify with the other government, which is not right.
But the previous government had some projects that the present federal government decided that they're not going to discard, they were going to continue. So what's wrong with this?
Yes, but, for the conference, there is some sentimental, attachment to or departure from that document, and we've had comments from so many people in government as saying that, look, we are not interested in that document. But if you pick it and look at it, if you set up 1,000 Constituent Assembly today, what they will come up with will not be different from what is contained in that. Nigerians are still the same. The issues are still the same. The true federal structure we talk about are still are there. How to make everybody an inclusive political system. Everything is taken care of there.
Speaking of Nigerians, this is a decision that the Senate came up with. And the Senate is meant to be a representation of Nigerians. They're representing the people. So it begs the question, if this is what they came up with, it probably reflects what the people have also come up with, or do you think that's not the case here?
It doesn't follow. If you ask Nigerians today, what do you want? I'm sure majority would say, let's not waste resources and our time over again, trying to do over again what we have done, what we have the document there. Government is supposed to be a continuum. You inherit assets and liabilities. The good things that we can still work with, let us use them. The 2005 conference cost about ₦1 billion. The one of 2014 cost about 7 billion naira. Why do we have to go over the same thing over again? People will spend their time, money, energy to do the same thing that has been done. So if you ask me really, what the National Assembly should do is to just make a law so that we bring that 2014, the report. Look at it. We may not take everything there. For instance, I personally don't agree with certain things there. The issue of create so many states, 9 per geopolitical zone. I think it doesn't make sense. Why, when the states are not viable economically, we want to create so many more. We can just create one for the southeast to make 6, and then 7 for the northwest, and then we are fine. So there are certain things like that that may not be, adopted, but fundamentally, all the issues addressed there, they are the same issues we are still talking about that Nigerians seem to, agree on. Why should we go over the issue, the same thing over and over again, that we have a document to work with?
So what role do you think the people can play in influencing their elected representatives to do what you are suggesting?
Well, the role they can play is to influence, of course, we have mechanisms for getting in touch with our representatives, telling them what we want. There should be more advocacy along that line. That, look, let us not waste our time on doing what we have already done. Let us use what we have, and then we'll forge ahead. It will be a waste of time, resources, energy, and all that. But I'm not optimistic that that is going to happen, because our people somehow, once they let people into office, they go to sleep.
Well, Professor Oyebode, if you could, what would you be, if you could advise the National Assembly, especially the Senate and the steering committee of 56 members that have been set up, what would you propose to them so that we can move the nation forward a little faster?
Well, my view is not too different from that of my colleague. Either we extract what is feasible and politically okay from the work done by the confab and pass such into law, or we set up the modalities for electing or selecting members of the Constituent Assembly that will be given the task of producing a blueprint for Nigeria. Once they set the modalities in place, then we implement the modalities and convene a Constituent Assembly with just one job: produce a viable constitution for Nigeria, and you give them a timeline. Okay? From what has been said, we have the experience of 2004, 2005, 2014, and even at the confab, we were given the works of the previous conferences. It's not that we were acting in isolation or in vacuo, as lawyers will say. So we were not born yesterday. Nigerians have been surviving politically since 1922. We've been holding elections and doing all sorts of things. So what I'm saying in essence is that the Senate, distinguished senators, should just pass the law on how to convene a Constituent Assembly, which will be charged with the task of producing the new constitution, at least the draft constitution, which will be enacted by way of a referendum. That is all that I think the Senate should do, instead of reinventing the wheel or going over what we already know. I think we should be creative. And you see, the world is watching us. I remember the confab, it was broadcast. I had calls from as far away as Australia saying they are watching the proceedings on TV, online, and what have you. So don't believe that the world is not watching you. And Nigeria is far too important a country to be left alone to Nigerians.
Okay.
The world is interested in how we are going to make out, and we have to harness the benefits of those who are exposed amongst us, who have gone to school, who have the experience, who have the wherewithal to
Professor.
tinker, not just tinker, think out the Constitution of Nigeria.
I want to thank you very much, Professor, for the time that you have spent, both of you, gentlemen, for being with us this morning. Professor Oyebode, Professor Akin Oyebode, Professor of International Law and Jurisprudence, as well as Professor David Awurawo of the Department of History and Strategic Studies, University of Lagos. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.